Welcome to the League Lecture Series, the first up for this year. And before we go any further, would you please silence your mobile phones? My name is Rebecca Connard. I serve on the League of Women Voters of Johnson County's Education Committee, along with Patty McCarthy and Linda Schreiber, who's taking photographs here. The League is grateful for our partnership with the Iowa City Public Library, which includes their live streaming service, and for that we extend a special thanks to Bond and Jason, wherever Jason is, for their technical expertise. Vicki Aiden is at the table at the back, and we encourage you to visit that table for more information about registering to vote, absentee voting, or becoming a League member. Today, we are privileged to introduce, before the midterm election on November 8, our guest speakers, who are Johnson County Auditor Travis Weipert and Inside Out Reentry Coordinator Katie McVeigh. Voting, a few words here on voting, is a fundamental right as well as a responsibility of American citizens. We as citizens are not required to vote, but voting is critically important to the health of American democracy. Simply put, in order to maintain our form of government, which is a representative democracy, citizens must participate in the process. We vote for leaders to represent us and our ideas, and elected leaders pledge to support our interests and to uphold the law. Two critical rights are reserved for U.S. citizens. Only citizens can vote in federal elections, and only citizens can run for federal office. Our first speaker, Travis Weipert, is well known to members of the League. Travis is a lifelong Iowan, raised along the Mississippi River in Marquette. I was recently there, beautiful. He received a bachelor's degree in business administration from Mount Mercy University. He then worked as an accountant at Aegon Asset Management before becoming the county auditor in 2012, and he is currently serving his third term. Travis and his wife, Abby, have a 2-year-old daughter, Asa. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Yes. Good. And the family actually expects to welcome a brother or sister on or around November 8th. So, great timing as a county auditor. Yeah, right. Our second speaker, Katie McVeigh, is Reentry Service Coordinator, coordinator for Inside Out Reentry Community. Among other things, she helps members find stable and secure housing, mental health services, other medical services, including medication management, and employment or vocational training. Prior to joining Inside Out, Katie worked in social services as a housing case manager for disabled and homeless clients to help them overcome the highest and most difficult barriers. Katie's mission is to make a difference in society, and she brings a real passion to assisting Inside Out members in knowing their rights and advocating on their behalf. Following their presentations, both speakers will take questions from the audience, and Patty will bring a microphone to you if you have a question, and make a note that we need that microphone in order to allow audience members who are not in the room to hear the questions that are asked. So, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Travis.
Thank you. So as mentioned, I'm Travis Weipert, Johnson County Auditor. Been in the position now 10 years, I guess, since it was brought up. I have this the slide up there, voter ready. Maybe it should have read auditor ready for a second kid due on election day. Kind of funny story, this morning my wife had a doctor's appointment, and we're driving to the Iowa River Landing UI Clinic, and we're listening to KCJJ, and Jim Hunter says to Captain Steve, did you know they're having another kid? And they were talking about voting stuff. So I had to call in later and say, yes, we are having another kid, and it's due on election day. So I put the voter ready up there, and we're going to go through some quick slides here. That's kind of what Secretary of State is saying. Are you voter ready? Kind of what's the same narrative I think that we're going along with here tonight is, what do you need to know to get out there and vote this election? So let's start with the voter registration deadline. October 24th is the early vote deadline. What that means is after that day, and you're going to see then we get into November 8th, is your requirements to register become a little more restrict. You're going to have ID, proof of residency, depending on where you're going, those types of things. So right now, if you're not registered, I would do that immediately. You can do it at our office. You can mail in the form still. You have time, but that clock is ticking, and we're going to get here shortly to when we start sending out ballots and early voting, which is October 19th, so that falls, and past that window that or just outside that window, but getting close to the other requirements you need to vote. So the November 8th election, that's the big one. Everybody knows that. That's what we're talking about. So what do you need on election day to vote? Most importantly, proof of ID. Now, the first thing I ask everybody to do is, have you checked if your driver's license is expired? If it's expired and passed, I believe it's 60 days, you can't use that to vote. So look at your driver's license, make sure it's up to date. I believe, here's another thing, I don't work with the DMV, but I believe you're still required if you need to update your driver's license ID, you need to schedule an appointment. So that's another thing I would get on, do it immediately because I know they're booked. If you haven't registered before, proof of residency. I'm not going to go through everything, but I'll throw some things out here that can be a utility bill, bank statement, U of I bill, anything that shows your name and proof of where you live. The good news is you don't need to bring that with you. You can pull that up on your cell phone now. If you drive to the polls, say you're not good with your cell phone, you know what the one thing I tell people you have in your car that will work? Car registration, your title, yep. So if you're looking for a document, your insurance should be in there with your address on it. And not only that'll have an expiration date, which is perfect. So if you're in a bind or friends that are in a bind, usually would tell them go right to your car and look for your insurance or your car registration. The other thing you can use is an attester. And you can see down here what an attester is. Now, I believe the law only allows you to attest for 2 people at your precinct. But if you do not have proof of ID or residence, if you know somebody in your precinct, they can swear an oath that you are who you are. So that is always an option. I didn't put the code section there, but the onus is on the attester to make sure you really are who you are. So there's a stiff penalty if they say, yes, you live in this precinct and you vote and you really don't. So just make sure the attester knows that. But this is one of the cool things. We're seeing this a little bit more probably in college towns where attesters will attest for somebody else that just, they may have their ID with them, but not proof of residency or not their ID. It's expired. They have a residence document. They'll go this route. So, all right, here is a voter registration form. And the reason I wanted to show this was there's certain things here, and I know I've preached this over and over, that you need to make sure you fill in. And I know it's kind of hard for me to point it out, and it was brought up early on. Question number 1 and 2, you need to vote yes. Are you a citizen, 18, yada, yada, yada. Now, the second box, ID number, you must put in an ID number, whether, again, that's your driver's license number, non-operator number, or the last 4 are your social security number. We must have that information to speed up the process of getting you registered. We absolutely need your last name, first name, not so much your middle or suffix. Address where you live, absolutely a must. If you're homeless, you can tell us what bridge you're under. We're going to work with you. We've dealt with that before. Where you receive mail, if different, probably not, but we do have some people still with post office box. Previous voter registration information. It's nice to have that if you're registered somewhere else in Iowa or out of state, but that won't stop us from processing your registration. So that's not one of those key boxes. Political affiliation, that's totally up to you what you want to pick. I'm not the one that gets to put down which parties are on there. There's a state law that determines that. We usually get questions about why isn't the Communist Party, and we can go on with just the list of parties that people wonder why they aren't listed. That's under a state code. The most important thing, we need your signature and the date you signed the form. Without that, it's null and void, and you will hear from our office. So kind of a quick rundown. I mean, really, all the basic stuff is everything but these two. If you don't pick a political party, then you're going to end up as no party. And if you notice, we don't have independents on the registration form. You're classified as no party here in Iowa. So now the big one that everybody's talking about right now, absentee ballot request. So I kind of put down all of the things that you need to go through to get an absentee ballot request. So let's start with the top one. Any registered voter may make a written application to their county auditor for an absentee ballot. That obviously must be received by the county auditor's office no later than 5 p.m., 15 days before the election, as I mentioned. There's a form you can fill out. However, if you don't have the form, you can write down all of that same information on a piece of paper and mail it to us, and that counts, as long as it has your signature and everything on it. So returning your ballot, pretty basic. We send you the postage paid envelope. You fill it out. We send you instructions. The one thing that drives me nuts is it says use a number 2 pencil. You don't need to use a number 2 pencil. You can use a pen, red, blue, black. Just fill in the oval. That is the other key thing. If you just circle the name, it's not going to count. I noticed heads nodding, like we've seen this many a times. So make sure you fill in that oval, fill it in well, and try to stay inside the lines. So you can mail your ballot into the office. This is probably the biggest thing, and I'm going to talk about it on another slide. This is the biggest election law change, and it was in effect for the last election last year. Your ballot has to be into our office at 8 o'clock on election night. There is no more postmark, none of that stuff. It has to be in our office 7:59 and 59 seconds. As 7 minutes, or at 7 p.m., 59 minutes, 59 seconds, I have to have that ballot at our counter. Big change. A lot of people think that if I mail it the night before, it's still going to count. Absolutely not the case going forward. The other big thing is, and we're going to send out a press release regarding this. So here in Johnson County, most of our election results, our absentees are the first numbers we would report right at 8 p.m. We're not going to be able to do that now because we have to wait to see if we have to count extra ballots. Well, the absentee ballots here in Johnson County can make up almost 30–40%. So usually when you see the absentees come in, they're the first numbers everybody's used to. You could get a feel for who is going to win the races. Now, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait because we have to wait for that last ballot to come in. We have to run them across the hall to be counted. We have to pull out the sticks, bring them back over to report the results to you folks. So we're hoping at 8:15 we'll have all of the absentees done. But we're going to send out a press release so I don't get all these emails. What is happening? Why are you guys so slow? Well, when you were asking me to present tonight about law changes and stuff, this is one the voters don't even know about, that you're not going to see the results as early as what you're used to. So if you have an absentee ballot in your possession and you have not voted it, you have two options. You can take it to the precinct, but you cannot hand in the voted one there. You'll have to spoil it at the precinct. They cannot accept the voted ballot. What they'll do is they'll go in, say spoiled, you'll have to re-vote. Your other option is you can bring that ballot to our office, again, before 8 p.m. So kind of one of those things a lot of people don't know about. We get calls, can I take my absentee ballot to my polling site? No, unless you want it spoiled. If you want it spoiled, it's a lot of extra work on our end. Somebody at the polling site has to call our office, ties up staff. I mean, we're happy to do it, but again, this is just one of those about voter being ready and knowing what you should and shouldn't do. Try to think ahead if you have that ballot in your hand. And we have we have a drop box right outside our office too that you can drop it off at any time. So the other thing you can do is you can vote a provisional ballot on election day if you don't have a tester, you don't have the information to register. And what a provisional ballot is you go ahead and vote it. And this is even, we've had felons that, they didn't know if they were still a felon or not. So we recommend that they go ahead and cast a provisional ballot, and then they need to come down to our office and verify they are who they aren't a felon, or they are registered. So we do receive a few provisional ballots. Another option folks don't know about that you can use on election day. So there's plenty of tools out there. If you have, and again, I mentioned about election, or your absentee can be delivered to your precinct or a polling site. If you have any questions regarding this, the best way to get a hold of us, unless it's election day, is email us. At elections, we have an elections email out there. Just go out to our website. Usually our phone lines right now are tied up all day. It's easier for staff with a quick question or somebody saying, call me. If it comes in via email, we can get back to you a lot quicker because we kind of know if you spell out what your issue is, we know ahead of time, we can start looking into it. So kind of one of those voter be ready, things that can make the process smoother for us and the voter. So this is this is your absentee request form. You can kind of see all the information on there that's required. Everything highlighted is what you need to provide. The one thing that is up there, you see the voter PIN number in box number 2. That is something that you have to get from our office. There's 2 cards that are mailed out. There's one that we tell you where your voting precinct or voting site is, and then there's another card that you can get with your PIN number on it. The card we mail you that we're authorized by the Secretary of State and the Iowa Code to mail you does not contain your PIN number on it. So we get a lot of people, that are confused that, I got this card in the mail, doesn't that count as my PIN? No, it does not. So just be aware that if you don't have ID or you think that one of the cards we mailed you has your PIN number on us, call us. Your last 4 digits of your Social Security are not your PIN number, so don't put those down either. And I should go back to voter registration form, driver's license number. I have had more people send it in with their Social Security numbers listed. Don't do that. That doesn't count. And you're giving us information or it's being mailed. You don't want somebody to know your Social Security number. That's why follow the boxes, the prompts, as we say. It's unfortunate. It's very confusing for a lot of people. What's my non-operator ID? What's my driver's license? Why do I need a PIN number? Well, the form before, I could, list the last 4 of my Social Security number. So just kind of follow the forms. If you have any questions, we have all kinds of information on our site, the Secretary of State's website. And again, the most important box that is always missed, it seems like, signature and date. It's kind of weird that you get everything filled out and you forget to sign it. Same way, when we mail your absentee ballot to you, make absolutely sure you sign the envelope that's coming back to us and date it. Otherwise, you're gonna get a call from us, and if it arrives a day or two beforehand, we can't get a hold of you, you're gonna be out of luck. So friends, family, if they're voting absentee, make sure they're always signing everything. And we do a great job highlighting all the information we need to try to help the voters out. Any questions kind of on the absentee part? All right, this is the big one, last slide. The polls now close at 8 p.m. They used to close at 9 p.m. for federal elections, 8 o'clock for city and school. It is now all at 8 p.m. So before, we always had people showing up, not understanding, you name it. I know we've had counties where even the poll workers were like, well, I thought I got to go home at 8 o'clock, and no, this is a 9 o'clock election. So you got about another 2 hours to go by the time you come back to the office. So if there's one crucial thing, and I know a lot of people unfortunately don't vote in the city and school election, is the poll closing time. The other thing we have, and I don't have it up on the slide, I forgot to bring the papers in with me, we have a whole host of satellite sites coming up. For you, or for those of you that don't know about satellite sites, you can vote at any satellite no matter, we see a paper in the back with them. You can vote at any satellite site in the county. So I know we have one coming up in Tiffin, we have one here at the library, we have Coralville Library, North Liberty. Even no matter where you live in the county, you can go and vote before the election day at those sites, which is extremely nice. It gives us, a lot of people ask why do you do the satellites and sites and stuff like that. Once people vote, we're able to tell how many people have voted at precincts. So we can switch our staffing around to better accommodate places where we know, if you're in Iowa City 01 as your precinct, and we already know 70% of the registered voters have voted there, then it allows us to start moving staff to other places. So that's great for us. That's why we try to engage the community, get out, vote early. We use all that data to decide where we need to send people on election day. We will have regular voting at our office October 19th, drive-through voting also. Outside of that, it's kind of, most of the law changes everybody wants to hear about are kind of behind the scenes. They deal with the recount process, auditing. I mean, it's all stuff that falls on the auditor behind the scenes. It's not really, for once we went, I would say, a year and a half without any crazy election laws being passed. And let's knock on wood, January is around the corner, the legislators will be back. So, yeah.
Travis, I don't know if I heard correctly or not, but can you vote at the auditor's office on election day?
That's a great question. You cannot. You have to go. Oh, yes. So the question was, do you have to vote or can you vote at the office or a drive-through on election day? No, you cannot. You have to go to your precinct. And that's why, too, when I said about if you have an absentee ballot, you can't drop it off at your precinct. You can have it spoiled, re-vote there, or you have to bring it to our office. But you cannot vote in our office on election day. So any other questions before I hand it over? Oh, I was going to say I'm sure I'll get a bunch more after you speak.
Can you address how recounts are going to be handled statewide? In the general election last time, there was some confusion about who had won one of the districts, and there was a recount. And it's different for different counties. Has that been changed?
No. As far as I know, it's still up to each county. When I say each county, so the auditor really has nothing to do with the recounts. I want to make that very clear. People find that very interesting. The only job the auditor has is bringing the ballots to the recount board and letting them do the process they decide on. So even if they ask me a legal question, or the county attorney who was there this last recount the whole time with me, we're not there to provide legal advice. We're just there to make sure that every ballot we hand them is accounted for. They count it how the way they want, and they're back in a, secure location at the end of the day. So I know that's one of the things people think is kind of crazy. They ask about the recount, and I'm like, other than we have to sit there the whole time, however many hours a day they work, we just sit there and watch them do their process. And it makes for some really long days. And I'm hopeful after this past 2 years ago when we had the recount, my wife's C-section is November 11th. I really don't want to be in a recount the last recount, we were worried. Our recount board was great. So each candidate gets to pick their person, then they determine the third. Our recount board was so good and so great at their job. We were worried we were going to have to work through the Thanksgiving holiday, and they went all out and worked tremendous hours, some late nights, weekend to make sure we could all be home for Thanksgiving. So kudos to them, because again, I have no say in that. They could have said, all three of them could have said, we want the next 2 days off. We're going to work through Thanksgiving, and I can't tell them no. So, yeah, kind of one of those weird, quirky things in the law. Everybody keeps asking me about recounts, and at the federal level, we just sit there and provide all the ballots, that were cast back to the folks who are doing the recounting. That makes sense. I know it's kind of yes. What do they say? It's clear as mud. Yes. So, any other questions before I hand it over? We're open at 7 a.m. when voting starts, 8 p.m. We have 64 voting sites across the county. You can look up on our website where you vote at. All that information is out there. We are, I think really the first time, we're going to have a survey at each voting site asking about your experience. So it would be nice if the league would push that to get people to respond. Yeah.
Travis, I wanted to ask, because it's been a significant change for people who are disabled or handicapped, who cannot go to the polls themselves and cannot deliver their absentee ballot themselves. Would you explain how that process is handled now? What are the requirements?
Yes, so it's on our website. I assume you're talking about ballot chasing.
Yes, but really, what is if you live in a nursing home?
Okay, well, that's a little different. So, that actually, now I kind of asked two questions all in one. So nursing home and care facilities are under a different code section. We have to send out, based on what the care facilities qualifications are, a bipartisan team to vote those people. Same way at the hospital, based on when they arrived. I mean, there's certain criteria. We do at times, Oak Knoll has assisted living and I believe a care facility attached. The assisted living facility folks are usually, almost always upset with me that when we're there with our bipartisan team for the people in the care center, they can't vote. The law says we're not there for them. You're in assisted living. Even though your building's attached, yes. So they could have a satellite. I know we have a person at Oak Knoll that goes around and is great about going to all the assisted living residents and getting them to fill out absentee request forms. Now, when it comes to, I think you're kind of also hinting at, if I have a ballot at home and I can't get it to the poll, what do I do? And I can't go to the poll, maybe I can't mail it. It's what's called ballot chasing. You're allowed to have a family member, and it's spelled out, I should have a slide on it, or I believe the code says if you're disabled, you can have somebody bring it for you. But the days of, let's say, I'll pick on you, let's say you're gonna go out and go door knocking and grab absentee ballots that are filled out, ready to be returned, you can no longer do that unless you have pretty much a personal relationship. And it's spelled out on our website who can and can't. So you could obviously bring in your husband, spouse, you know, maybe even your daughter, she's living in your house. It just all kind of depends on the circumstances. Any other questions? I know a lot of info out there. The other thing too is if you're 17 right now, you can register to vote if you're going to be 18 by election day and vote. So don't make sure we're telling our youth that. So, and you can even vote in the primary, which we're well past that, which is a law change. If you're going to be 18, come that election day. So, one of those other kind of weird little changes that happen. Anything else? I know we'll get a bunch of questions, I'm sure, when you're done. So, all right, I will hand it over then. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Travis. Voting is a core right and a liberty to all Americans. Yet more than 6 million American citizens are unable to vote because of past criminal convictions. As I am sure many of you know, in Iowa, there was previously a lifetime voting ban for people with felony convictions. Iowa was the last state in the nation that still banned people with felony convictions from voting. In 2020, Governor Reynolds restored voting rights for more than 60,000 Iowans with felony convictions who had been discharged from their sentences, meaning they have completed probation, parole, work release, any sort of ties to the correctional system, minus paying their fines, if they had any. This essentially means that once they're off all sorts of probation, supervision, they may vote. However, because people with felony convictions were not able to vote for so long, there's still confusion on who can and cannot vote. Many people don't know how to find out if they can and cannot vote. Many people are told it's an automatic right. It's restored instantly once you are discharged from papers, according to Governor Reynolds. This has caused many issues. A lot of them aren't told when they're discharged officially. A lot of them aren't sure if they're officially discharged by their dates. They tend to change without anybody telling them. For many Iowans who are still serving out their felony convictions, whether in prison or out, voting is off the table for them. This excessive punishment is unnecessary and harmful to our individuals returning citizens. People who have served their term of incarceration are still being defined as felons. That is not who they are. They have a felony or two in their past. That does not define who they are as a person or as individuals. Many of our members cannot vote for something that they have done 15 years ago, that they have been off paper, parole, everything for the last 5. And they won't be able to vote or have those rights given back for another 15 years because, yes, they are out of prison, but they are still on paper. They still have a probation officer. They're still on parole. They are still working through the work release program, but yet they are returning citizens. Citizens have the right to vote, but yet they do not. So they are back in society, living active lives, working, rebuilding, but yet they don't hold that fundamental ability to vote and have a say in what happens to their own lives. They are once again being told what they can and cannot do, but they've done everything that they have been asked and everything that they've been told, but they don't have a say in their own life. Out of our 212 active members, only 62% of them are of them can vote. 62 of our Inside Out members out of 212 can vote because of these laws. Voter disenfranchisement, of formerly incarcerated individuals also harms them emotionally. They feel isolated. They don't feel part of the community that they have every right to feel a part of and be a part of. One member specifically expressed that he does not feel like a citizen, even though he has been out of prison since 2018 and still won't be able to vote until 2028. We have several members of our board of directors that are returning citizens who were formerly incarcerated. Several of them won't be able to vote till 2032 based on their previous crimes, yet they have been productive members of society, have started and have their own businesses that are thriving, are on our board of directors, are on PTO, the active members, but yet they cannot vote and have a say in their own lives. The laws that Governor Reynolds have changed are slow, yet have an impact that, how do I say this? That affect more than just the members re-entering society. They have their family, their friends, their employers, everyone should have a say in how their lives are ran, not by somebody above them. They should all have a say in how they run their own lives. A study has shown that among previously arrested, voters are less likely than half to reoffend. That says a lot, that if they have that ability to vote and say in their lives, they are less likely to reoffend and less likely to go back to prison because they feel a part of the community. They feel a part of something. They feel that they are doing something instead of just sitting around waiting again to be told what to do. No one is kept safe by withholding the right to vote. No one is safe. No one is safe because you can't vote. That doesn't mean you're unsafe. It's everybody's right. It's everyone's. Having the right to vote is a defining aspect of citizenship. How can you be a citizen? How can you be a member of a community when that right is stripped from you and won't be given back to you for X amount of years, if ever? Sometimes there's a life ban. Sometimes they'll be out of prison, but yet they still will not, till the day they die, get those voting rights back. It's important that these amendments not end up taking away voters' rights, but that they benefit our current executive orders. Any constitutional amendment will be in place for a very long time, possibly generations. So it must protect the voting rights of everyone, not just non-felons. Governor Reynolds has come far, but not far enough. Yeah, that's basically. Citizens, if you're a citizen, you should have the right to vote regardless. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Thank you. So, does the crime that they're convicted of have some sort of influence on how long they're prohibited from voting after the fact? I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying, that they need red
Their
flags restored.
crime, depending on what the crime is, yes. As of now, murderers, certain higher charges, there is still a ban on them regardless. If you've, some sex offenders, if you have a lifetime sentence, even though you're out of prison, you'll still have a lifetime. You're basically on parole for a lifetime. You will never get those, you will never get your voting rights back because you will be connected to the justice system for your life, even if you're not in prison. Yeah, go ahead.
No, and I think, I think any Class A felony, I'll have to check the code, no matter what restricts you. Class A felonies here in Iowa, murder, kidnapping, things that keep you in prison for life. So those are pretty much, that's the big restriction, which those folks aren't getting out, ever. We do have a few states that allow convicts to vote from prison. Iowa isn't one of those. I don't want to open that can of worms, but, yeah, here in Iowa, Class A felony pretty much restricts you forever.
Yes. Anybody else?
If a former felon were to come to me, I work with the League of Women Voters, and want to register to vote, and is out of prison, believes he or she has served parole, probation, should I just go ahead and register them to vote?
As long as they have discharged their sentence from, if they are not on probation, parole, yes, they are eligible to vote.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add too, that you're gonna like that. We had a guy recently, within the last probably 2 to 3 months, he showed up, was registered to vote, convicted felon, showed up at our office, asked to be removed from the voter rolls because he wasn't sure that he had his full rights restored and didn't want any more legal trouble. He asked, how do I go about confirming that, I am discharged and I can register? Told him to contact the Secretary of State's office, and sure enough, he came back happy as could be with his papers that said I'm good to go, and he re-registered, and we have him on the system. So he was extremely happy, and so was I, to see somebody come back. And as you mentioned,
A lot of them are in fear of registering to vote because they can get in trouble. They can go back to prison for trying to vote. So a lot of them don't.
Sit for this. We can sit so we can answer together.
You want to say?
No, because you're doing a great job.
I have another question about people who have been convicted of felonies out of state.
Oh, out of state?
Yes.
I do have that because I knew it was going to happen.
And before she's looking for, I'll kind of give my response to this. Whenever we have somebody from another state come in, the first thing we do, if they're a convicted felon, they'll tell us, they might say, I think I'm discharged in Florida, Kentucky, or wherever. Our response is always to contact the Secretary of State's office here in Iowa. And the reason we do that is I don't have access to the information the Secretary of State has. So we can't just make you free and clear here in Johnson County based on you coming to our office.
So if you have a felony conviction from another state and that state has restored your right to vote, you can vote in Iowa. If you have been discharged in Florida And Florida says you can vote in Iowa.
And again, that's where we're always confused. And when I say we in our office, somebody from Florida might came in and say, I'm discharged. Well, I think I am. How do I know? Well, that's why we send them to the Secretary of State's office to verify. Again, and you brought up probably the biggest thing I hear from convicted felons who want to vote is they're so scared that it's going to come back to bite them. And that's very unfortunate. I mean, they've served their sentence. They're back in the community. They're trying to do what's right. And here they are, like this guy was just talking about, scared to death that this is going to throw me back in prison. You know, when I'm trying to do something right.
Yeah, they're fearful. So they just don't. You know, and a lot of the times they don't even come to check. They don't because they're so in fear that somehow, some way, just by them asking about it, they're gonna somehow get in trouble again.
So is their first step to go to the Secretary of State's office or to you, Katie?
I would say the Secretary of State, their website. I was just on it today, actually. It's step by step. Are you a convicted felon? Yes or no? Click yes. Have you been discharged? Yes. And then it'll say you have the right to vote, or no, you cannot vote. Okay. So it walks them through, and it's very step by step.
And if they don't have access to a computer, can they go to you?
They sure can. We can help them. We can assist them with. They are always welcome to come down to Inside Out, and we can assist them with that.
Or visit a nice public library like this and use the computer system.
Yeah. But the Secretary of State website has a ton of information on it as well, and links to Governor Reynolds' orders and stuff like that to explain a little bit more in depth.
And really, too, if you're, a felon that's coming out of the system, they should have their discharge papers and stuff, too, which helps tremendously even in our office. When we see that, that it appears they have all their paperwork, we'll still probably direct them to somebody like you or the Secretary of State's office. But I'll tell them, I think you're good to go, but just do this last check, just make sure. And
speaking of that, a lot of the times they will get their paperwork after the fact. It may be weeks, it may be a couple months, but they may miss this chance to vote if by not having those actual papers that say you're discharged in their hand, because then they feel like they're not discharged, even though the website says it, as so-and-so said it over the phone or verbally to them. Until they have that paper in their hands that says you are discharged, you are no longer relying on the state, they don't believe it. It's not real to them because they've been told so many things so many different times.
And we have run into that in our office. I'm glad you brought that up, where somebody will say, go out and look, my sentence online has been discharged, but I don't have the papers. What do I do? And again, we have to direct them. Our office just can't go off the website. We do the best we can, but
there's a lot of gaps and holes.
If there was one thing I would like to see changed at the Secretary of State's office is that they have somewhere where felons can just contact a person there to clear up their status. It's always been a circle, yes, that, I've been in this job long enough where I've sent somebody to the Secretary of State's office only for them to send them back to me, only to be sent to an attorney. And to me, how hard is it to find out if somebody's sentence is discharged?
Right.
It shouldn't be that hard.
And the paperwork used to be much harder to get to be able to vote after being a felon. And that discouraged so many. So, because you had to prove and prove and prove and prove who you were and that you weren't on paperwork anymore and that you are a returning citizen. And the paperwork itself was confusing and complicated. Plus it was, a stack of papers just to be able to do what is the right of every citizen in this country.
2 questions. How many people in Iowa are returning citizens, estimate? And who or what could the league do to help streamline this process? Is it a law? Do we need to advocate with legislators? Or do we need to go to the governor? What do you recommend?
Now, your first question, in what time frame? Because, I mean, they're returning every day. Multiple people are getting out of prison every day, but yet are still on work release or on probation or on parole. So that number I can't give you. But I do think that there needs to be more advocating about these laws, because a lot of felons don't know about the law that changed, that they are able to, and that it's supposed to be automatic, that once they are discharged, that their right is automatically restored. And there's a website that you can go on. Governor Reynolds has a website. However, that is not updated accurately. I've checked several members that are officially discharged, that their discharge date was months ago and are still showing active that they aren't eligible to vote. So this automatic is not necessarily automatic. And again, that goes back to their fear of, I don't want to register to vote because this was saying that I can't, that I'm not. But it's, so it's a very vicious circle. And that's where they get discouraged and say, oh, well, I'm just going to suck it up and deal with this, until I get my paperwork or until somebody, official tells me different.
Well, and I think, too, when it comes to felons here in Iowa, we went through a long period, if you remember, our governors could decide what they wanted to do with felons. So all of a sudden you had, I'm just throwing out governor names here, Vilsack saying, we're going to expand it. And then, Culver may have cut it back a little, Branstad cut it back a little more, and then all of a sudden Reynolds cut it way back. I mean, felons are confused based on what, and I've had this question before. Well, I came out of prison under Culver, and my understanding is he signed his executive order, I have my rights back, correct? Well, I can still vote no matter who the governor is. And again, you have to look, I don't know exactly what was signed into order at that time. As a felon, I would just advise you to talk with an attorney or the Secretary of State's office to make sure. But, I think everybody in this room, I think all of us have been around here long enough in Iowa, we saw this all play out where one governor signs an executive order saying blanket, every felon coming out just gets their rights back, and then it's restricted, then it's back to, and that's where when you're asking about law changes, I was very, very vocal. Iowa was one of the last states to do anything about felons. And I don't think it's enough, but I will give Kim Reynolds a tad bit of credit that at least we're starting to make our way down the right path.
Agreed. We're not there, but we're slowly getting there. I think there's a lot of confusion, though, as to this crime versus this crime is eligible, but this crime is not. Whether it be Executive Order 7 or not, which Executive Order 7 applies to felony convictions in any jurisdiction, federal or not, that result in loss of citizenship rights in Iowa. So, again, there's back to that citizenship. They don't feel part of society. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.